Welcome to 10 Minute Climate, the podcast brought to you by Beaverbrook Energy. Beaverbrook Energy helps clients navigate the energy transition, identifying the best route forward, quantifying the costs and benefits, and delivering real-world results through funded and managed projects. Join Max.
Hi, I'm Max.
And Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony.
Who between them have got over 70 years of experience in the energy industry, and they're here to share it with you. Each episode, they'll cut through myths, answer the questions you've always wanted to ask, and break down the latest news about the energy transition. It's everything you need to know, delivered in just 10 minutes. So let's get started. Welcome to 10 Minute Climate.
I think we've got to appreciate how oil is fundamental to everything. To everything, the production of your shirt, probably the glasses.
I'm going to say point to things in this room that have a petroleum-based extracted product in it, and you probably wouldn't get a single surface or part of this room or our dress or our technology or anything that didn't have an oil-based product in it.
Yeah, and expanding that to fossil gas, there's some element of fossil gas powering the electricity.
Yes.
We got here on the train. We just went to a cafe. Electricity. It's everything. If you take away fossil fuels, you go back very fast to the mid-19th century and to a very, very poor quality of life.
Relatively.
Why?
It was a great change in the quality of life from 1250 to 1850. But from 1850 to 1950, we changed.
It accelerated.
Accelerated.
It accelerated pretty fast, But it's this Faustian bargain, right? We've sold our souls. We've created an incredible society, unbelievable advances in the quality of life and the longevity of life, but at the same time, we're destroying our planet.
And I think that there needs to be something of an understanding as well, which I'm not sure is there, that the products of the hydrocarbon industry aren't just limited to the stuff we hear about every day, which is basically burning it to move ourselves around, creating carbon from it. We do also convert those molecules into lots of things, drugs and plastic and paint and cloth and just so many different products that are integral within every aspect of our society. So you're not going to stop the industry of hydrocarbon chemistry, but I do think it's possible to stop setting fire to a large amount of it. But
the interesting thing is what happens to gasoline, because originally when we were refining oil, gasoline was a waste product; it was chucked away.
Yeah.
And we might get back to that, where we want the plastics, but we don't want the gasoline.
Yeah.
Then it's funny because you've then got a very cheap byproduct that people are going to use, because it's suddenly much cheaper than it has been, because it's a waste. So that's a risk.
So you like to start using it as a solvent or something? Or you could probably find some bonding compound which would interact with, because they made napalm out of gasoline.
Okay, we don't need any more of that.
No, but they added a jelly to it and turned it into a totally different thing. If you apply that thinking more progressively, you could perhaps make building blocks out of it. I don't know, whatever. But if there's enough of it around.
In terms of hydrocarbons, we're two things. One, we burn them, but also our materials are built off them.
We've got two industries at the moment, which, despite the steel industry and everything else, you basically got transport and agriculture create more environmental damaging gas than anything else. So the easy targets is transport straight away, because we've got alternatives to use there. We can electrify. We can potentially look at making green hydrogen, although there's the argument about why would you collect solar power and then turn it into hydrogen and get all the losses both ways when you could just put electricity in the car in the first place. Agriculture will be a bit more difficult, because how do you deal with the fertilizer issue? How do you deal with our obsession globally of eating animal protein, which is huge, not just in terms of the amount of environmental damaging gases that it produces, but in terms of the resource that's inefficiently applied to growing other animals so we can eat them. And that's not saying I'm going to suddenly go vegan or anything, but it is a dramatic issue.
But it's the scale of the challenge that kind of really really
Yeah.
gets me. It's everything. It's not just all the electricity we consume, or most of it. It's not just the transport, the aviation emissions. It touches every material, every
Yeah.
consumer product. As you said, it touches the food supply chain in many different ways. And we have to re-engineer the whole thing, and against a backdrop of not much time.
Because you take plastics out of it, what are you going to use for insulation on your electric cables, on your wind turbines and solar panels? And
But those things don't necessarily matter. You're using them for a long period of time, so it's
Yes.
not carbon emitted. Okay, they're not wonderful materials for other reasons, like sort of PFAS and plastics pollution that affects our
Forever
hormones
chemicals,
and forever
yeah.
chemicals. You have all of that issue, but fundamentally, if you're using foam injection in your loft, it's there for probably some decades, and that's all right. But single-use plastic bottles. Now, we say,
Why?
well, you say that.
Didn't
but
exist
if you
when I was a kid.
I know, but the glass bottles that water came in, higher carbon footprint.
Really?
Much heavier. Yeah. So it really is not straightforward.
There was a system when you used to recover bottles out of the market and you recycled them that, someone like a fruit juice manufacturer would have a bottle go through the system 6 or 7 times before it got so degraded that they'd scrap it. And then actually making other glass bottles from old glass bottles is a much less energy intensive process than making new glass out of rocks, which is basically what you have to do. You've got a couple of industries, steel and glass, which are very difficult to deal with in terms of renewables because you can't get the temperatures that you require to melt rocks without severe problems. So as much recycling in those industries, which you can maintain recycling product using renewables, would be great. So if we had reuse bottles and recycled bottles and we weren't so hung up on clear glass, I think we could solve that problem technically.
The bottom line here is moving away from petrochemical-based materials is every bit as much of a challenge as moving away from hydrocarbon-based fuels, petrochemical-based fuels, and we've only just begun to scratch the surface. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
Saying we're always going to need oil.
Yes. Or some form of similar
Always
product.
is.
But it depends because linked poly is the thing which doesn't refer to parrots, but molecules strung together, which forms particular type of materials, which are very prevalent in oil. So you've got a situation where you'll never have a raincoat again that doesn't leak if you haven't got the oil industry.
Yeah, oil is a miracle substance.
Well, it's a very rich hydrocarbon soup, isn't it? And although it exists in various stages, everything literally from shale, so you've got rocks with oil in, through liquid to gas, and we found uses for them. It wasn't the uses were there. We weren't looking for how am I going to make paint out of this stuff in the ground. We had a use. We had paint. It was rubbish.
Yeah.
And we found that we could make better paint by using oil.
Are we ever going to run out of oil?
No.
We've been talking about peak oil for a long time.
Peak oil used to be, when are we going to start getting to the point where we no longer have sight of any oil resources going forward? And even when I was working for oil companies, the internal argument was at this price.
Yeah.
Right? Bear in mind, in the 1950s, less than a lifetime ago, oil was about $2 a barrel. It's now probably $72 a barrel and has been as high as $102 a barrel, which means that all of a sudden certain ways of finding oil suddenly become commercially viable. No one is drilling the Marianas Trench at the moment for oil because it costs a lot of money to go and get it, but there will almost certainly be oil there.
Yeah, and I think what happens is that oil gets replaced in certain uses.
Yep.
And therefore what we're currently producing goes into different processes and it becomes cheaper because there's low demand.
Yes.
I think demand it's roughly at the height it's probably ever going to be at the moment. It seems to be coming off a bit. Electric vehicles are now 20% of global sales. It's beginning to dent. I think it's 2 or 3 million barrels a day of oil demand which is 2-3% roughly, is being replaced by electric cars.
So all the major oil producing nations have for the last decade or so been noticeably diversifying their economies. So they weren't just, relying on the stuff coming out of the ground. They were getting into other things. You look at a lot of the Arab states, they've invested in infrastructure, in overseas investments, all sorts of things to try and diversify and stop the hit, because they're not daft. They know that although oil is never going to go away, I think the transport demand will disappear. And that's I don't know what the statistics are. It's probably half of the oil consumption in the world is transport at the moment, at least half.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
It's enormous.
Just an example of how important oil is. So right now, Ukraine's fighting Russia. Do you know that 5% of Ukraine's GDP comes from the transit fees of Russian gas passing through Ukraine to Europe?
That doesn't surprise me. I was aware that there was a pipeline. I didn't realise it had such a large economic impact. But it seems quite weird that you've got two countries fundamentally at war with each other, and one of them's paying the other one.
Yeah,
to delivering a service.
To transport gas to the people backing one of them who say they're at war.
Yeah.
It's completely nuts. But that is how important, in this case, gas, or the scale of the fossil industry is.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. It really helps us grow and continue bringing you valuable content. If you're curious to learn more about Beaverbrook Energy and how we're navigating the future of energy, feel free to reach out to us directly. And for those looking for quick, actionable insights on the energy transition, be sure to subscribe to our 10-second climate newsletter, delivered every weekend with essential intelligence to help business leaders stay ahead of the curve. We appreciate you listening, and we look forward to having you join us again next time. Stay informed, stay engaged, and take care.